Hello everyone, welcome to the final stage in the road for this season. It is Road to Punchestown, and Ruby and I are back together to talk about what should be, Ruby, 5 fabulous days.
With a bit of luck, Lydia, I'm glad that the weather is much brighter here in Kildare than it is in London this evening, as I sit in somewhat of the brightness and you in the dark, but hopefully it'll be a bright Punchestown and not a dark one.
It should look really good. I mean, there's some really interesting clashes, and we'll talk about that. Is there quite a lot of potential for horses to switch around from what people expect to be the target during the course of the week?
Obviously you can run twice at Punchestown. It's not like Cheltenham where you're only allowed run once, and once you declare you're out. But no, you can declare twice in Punchestown. Is there room for moving around? Probably not, because if you declare on Tuesday, your excuse not to run can only really be ground. Other than that, you can't decide, well, Thursdays looked weaker and not run. When you're declared, you have to have a pretty valid excuse not to run, or you're suspended and not allowed run. So there's not as much scope for changing once declarations are done, but horses can run twice.
Okay, let's remind ourselves what the track at Punchestown is like. Right-handed and undulating. The chase course tends to favour front runners. There's fresh ground each day over hurdles. So the hurdles track tends to get slightly tighter each day, but it's never in the tightest formation, Ruby.
No, definitely not. Slightly tighter, maybe slightly shorter might be a better word for it. I don't think you could ever describe Punchestown's festival track as tight. And even when Punchestown Lydia in February gets to its tightest, it's still 10 furlongs in the circuit. Whereas at the festival, you were upwards on 14 furlongs around. It's what you might cover the last 2 furlongs over hurdles a second time, but it's a huge expanse, upwards of 6 meters of fresh ground every day. It's a wonderful racecourse, and look, it's all geared to April, and it's looked after like that, and the place looks amazing. I was over there during the week.
And there's some new starts, I understand.
Yeah, they've gone back into what would have been the old 5 furlong shoot, when there was a predominant flat track in Punchestown for the 2 miles and 3 furlongs up to 2 miles and 5 furlong starts. So they would all come from that chute, depending on the rail alignment to the exact distance, but you would run straight at the 4th last fence and 3rd last hurdle when you start now, rather than having to come from around the bend as they were last year and in previous years.
What impact do you think that could have on the races? Could they be changed at all?
No, it should. It's put back into design or to help with messy starts. And you did get a lot of charging at the 2.5 mile start at Punchestown, because those on the inside had a significant advantage. At least now, out in a straight line, it shouldn't favour those to the inside over those on the outside. So it's, I suppose, removing draw bias.
Sounds like fairer all round. And this has been Willie Mullins' playground in previous seasons, hasn't it? Particularly last season when he had 19 winners. Do you expect it to be so again?
No, obviously he had an incredible Cheltenham, and Willie as a trainer targets Punchestown. He works back from probably a little bit later, actually, probably back from Auteuil in June or in May. But all these horses are geared to still be in training and at the height of their powers at this time of year. There's a significant amount of prize money on offer at Punchestown, and Willie Mullins likes to win as much of it as he can.
And would you say that he targets it more than Gordon Elliott or Henry de Bromhead?
Possibly. That's probably to do with starting points in the season too. Willie's horses probably don't get moving until the middle of November, the Morgiana meeting, even a bit later this year because of the dry weather, whereas Gordon will be out at Down Royal at the end of October. So the difference at the start is also the difference at the end.
And Gordon was particularly strong. I think he sent over a very strong team for Aintree. And Henry de Bromhead, he could do absolutely nothing wrong last season. He's just been functioning like an ordinary mortal this season, hasn't
he? Even though he's won the Champion Hurdle and the Gold Cup. I think that's slightly harsh.
What, being an ordinary mortal?
Yeah, I know. Sorry, you're right. That's not harsh. But look, even last year, Lydia, his horses definitely weren't in great form at Punchestown, but Honeystuckle still managed to deliver. And look, Henry, as we said, won a Gold Cup and a Champion Hurdle, and obviously a Plutar is a much better horse going left-handed, so he's not coming to Punchestown. But his horses probably hasn't been at the same strike rate this year, but he's still trained a lot of winners.
Absolutely. Right. Okay. That's the preliminaries, our sort of overview of the festival done. We're going to go day by day now. So that obviously means we'll start with Tuesday. So we start on the first day, the Tuesday, with the Champion Chase. And we asked you a question. Which of these would win? Would it be Energumene? Would it be Chacun Pour Soi? Or would it be an other? We'll find out what Ruby and I think, and then we'll go back to what you all decided. So Ruby, Cheltenham seems the obvious place to start, where Energumene won the Queen Mother Champion Chase. Now, the race rather fell apart around his ears, but nonetheless, this was an extremely high-class performance on the clock.
Yeah, it certainly was. And look, that they set out to go a good gallop from Flagfall. Obviously, Shishkin never went, didn't come through the tape. Chacun Pour Soi got away well, jumped the first well, down to the second fence and pinged it. Envoy Allen was up there with him. And Energumene, in a change of tactics from Ascot, was right at the back. Now, at the fifth fence, Chacun Pour Soi flew it. And I was watching, thinking, he's really having a going day. But when he got to the ninth, he put down, got in too close, seemed to land on himself, and got rid of Patrick Mullins. But then when you flick it to the next fence, which was the last ditch, on landing, you can just see Paul Townend pulling Energumene back. I mean, that's some luxury heading to the top of the hill in the Champion Chase, but that's how easy he was going. Down to the third last, Envoy Allen lands in beside Energumene again. You're kind of thinking, whoa, is he back? But maybe on the rain softened ground, on a horse that did have a wind operation in the past, the rain scuppered his chance as well. But away from the second last, Chacun Pour Soi flies it. Envoy Allen has emptied, and Energumene then just powered away from the last fence to win, as you said, in a really good time. Commanding performance. The others didn't perform, but you can take nothing away from Energumene.
You really can't. That was a superb performance from him. Let's move on to what he and Chacun Pour Soi achieved at Punchestown last year, because they were both in the winners' enclosure. Let's start with Chacun Pour Soi. He ran here, came up against Allaho. Chacun Pour Soi, of course, had run a bit below his best when third in the Queen Mother Champion Chase, and Allaho had been fabulous in the Ryanair.
Yeah, and they went at it hammer and tongs from the word go. Both Paul Townend and Rachel Blackmore both wanted to set a high tempo and use their horse's ability. And away from the second fence, you'll see Chacun just about has the edge over Allaho. But as they run down the hill away from the third fence, Allaho's got up on the outside and Rachel gets across in front of Paul and he has to switch. But the difference was jumping between a 2.5 mile horse and a 2 mile horse. And Chacun jumped his way back into the lead at the back of the fifth fence. And he was always in control then. At the third last fence, Nube Negre and Allaho are trying to get onto his tail. But Chacun's pace and his jumping speed just had them flat to the boards all the way. Now, the interesting part is when they run off the home turn, how far Allaho is behind Chacun Pour Soi. But by the time they jump the last fence and get to the winning post, Allaho is actually running Chacun Pour Soi down. The stayer versus the speedster. But it did leave a doubt in my mind as to how strong a stayer Chacun Pour Soi might be. Yes.
But I suppose he's particularly suited by Punchestown, isn't he? We've already discussed how that front-running tactic seems to be favoured. He jumped, as you say, particularly slickly, and he kills the race further out than that.
He does kill the race further out, but it's maybe slightly easier to kill the race when it's a 2.5 mile horse behind you. Will he be able to kill the race with a 2 miler like Energumene behind him is the question. And when you watched him at Punchestown last year, he was ridden in a similar way to Chacun Pour Soi. Now, he had Captain Guinness behind him in second place and Janadil. Janadil was coming back in trip, having won over 2 miles and 4 furlongs at Fairyhouse. Captain Guinness just quite hadn't been as good as Energumene all year, but when it gets across to the third last fence, it's what Energumene does to Captain Guinness and Janadil. Flies the third last, off the home turn down to the second last. It's a one horse race. And whilst he does get close to the second last and again at the last fence, he didn't show any signs of slowing down. And I think he'll be able to lie into Chacun Pour Soi, and whereas Chacun might fade, I don't think Energumene will.
No, I tend to agree with that. Just to be a bit picky about his jumping, it wasn't just the last two where you would say they were probably straight out mistakes. Earlier, he got in close a couple of times. His jumping wasn't as slick as Chacun Pour Soi, so Chacun Pour Soi might be able to put him under some kind of pressure.
I'd imagine that's what Patrick Mullins will try and do, but I just think Energumene, whilst he doesn't look as flamboyant, or wasn't last year in Punchestown, he's still very fast from takeoff to landing. He doesn't spend much time in the air. He doesn't delay. And I think, I know one is shades of odds on, one is a shades of odds against, but you'd have to favour the odds on shot here.
Yes, so do I. And do you think that the tactics will be similar to Cheltenham with Energumene? Because as you mentioned, that was a change of tactics, or will he sit a bit closer to Chacun Pour Soi?
I'd imagine he'll sit closer, but at, it'll be fair game. It'll be whatever Patrick thinks he should do and whatever Paul thinks he should do. There won't be too much outside interference from the trainer. It'll be, you're riding him, I have him here. Best of luck to you.
The only one we haven't mentioned is Andy Dufresne, who finished second in the Grand Annual. Has he got any sort of chance of getting involved?
No, I don't think so. I mean, even if the handicapper is 7-8 pounds wrong with Andy Dufresne, that still only brings him to 164 or 5, and that still leaves him 10 or 12 pounds short.
Okay, let's have a look at what you think at home. Not surprisingly, overwhelmingly, people have voted for Energumene to win. There's still a chunk of people who believe in Chacun Pour Soi, who put up a career best performance in this race last year, and very few can have any of the other three at any price. Right, okay, that's the Champion Chase. Let's move on next to the Dooley Insurance Group Champion Novice Chase, shall we? And this is a fascinating race. And again, we asked you what would be likely to win, and we'll find out what you thought in a few moments' time. We'll start with Bob Olinger, who is a fascinating contender here, stepping up to 3 miles, tongue-tie for the first time, having been diagnosed and treated for a muscle problem after winning. Obviously, he won it, but he wasn't going to, the turners at the Cheltenham Festival. What do we make of him now?
He's still Bob Olinger. And I think, look, if you go back to January here, Lydia, at Punchestown, Capodanno, Bob Olinger. Now, it was low-lying sun on this occasion, plenty of fences omitted, and there was only one fence in the home straight, whereas there will be 2 at the festival. But he did show a fair turn of foot to take it off Capodanno, get by Capodanno. Now, he went to the last and he was slightly careful, but he still beat Capodanno well on this occasion. Now, I think stepping up in trip, I've always felt that will help Bob Olinger, but I'm just not sure after Cheltenham which Bob Olinger we're going to get. And I think when you look at the Brown advisory, the mind how he finished, to me, the key part of it, the Turners, sorry, they keep changing the names. Even I don't know them anymore. But the Turners, I think when you look at one particular point of that race, that's the point that has question marks over Bob Olinger for me. Just right now, I think next year again, he could be 100%, but I think if he can get over Cheltenham, it'll be some performance.
So bearing in mind the torn muscle that's been treated and the first time tongue tie, it sounds like it's more complicated than necessarily just the muscle, maybe? Well,
I mean, if he had a torn muscle, he has to have missed a little bit of time, obviously, to recuperate. And I'm sure he's 100%, and Henry is happy with him. But when you watch him in the Turners, if you watch him at the 6th last fence, watch when he takes off, how he screws behind in the air to make that jump. Now, it wasn't a massive jump. It was a big jump, but not a massive jump. He then goes to the 5th last and puts down really slow in front of it, loses ground on Gallop and the Champ, and then gets to the 4th last and parts the Birch. It was that particular section of the track that was the winning and losing of that race. Gallopin just put him jumping wise to the pin of his collar, and Bob Olinger couldn't answer it. Going slower will definitely suit him. You don't need as many flamboyant jumps in a 3 mile chase as you do shorter in distance. At 2.5 or even at 2, you need to be more flamboyant. But look, I still think he's a hell of a good racehorse. He's unbeaten over fences. But if there was one horse that I would be worried about coming here after Cheltenham, it's definitely him.
Okay, let's move on to the Brown advisory, in which Capodanno eventually finished 4th and Beacon Edge was 7th. Neither of them were ever truly involved. Capodanno jumped badly and Beacon Edge didn't really have a cut.
No, that's probably the best way of putting it. Look, obviously, as you pick it up going to the 2nd, Ahoy, Senor and Long Presse, who are going to finish 1st and 2nd, are on the front end. Beacon Edge is 5th or 6th. Capodanno is behind that. But at the 6th fence, Capodanno makes his first mistake, nods on landing. They get back onto the 9th fence. You see Capodanno has to reach for it, so does Beacon Edge. They get to the 12th fence. Capodanno is slow. Beacon Edge is quite deliberate as well. At the 14th fence, both miss it. And then at the 15th, Capodanno was deliberate. The 16th, which is the last ditch, Beacon Edge was deliberate. Neither ever got into a rhythm. Now, I don't know, was that real testing ground on the day where they just didn't like being in behind? I couldn't tell you, but neither horse was in a real good rhythm, like the 2 in the front end. And they run down to the 3rd last. I mean, they're 7th and 8th. The 2 at the very back of the shot are Beacon Edge and Capodanno. One horse had pulled up. Capodanno keeps going better than Beacon Edge to finish 4th. Beacon Edge finishes 7th. But I don't think it was a true running from either horse on a rain softened day. But neither got into a rhythm. Neither of them looked like winning at any stage.
I don't think Capodanno's proved himself to be a Grade 1 horse yet, has he? And I know Beacon Edge has won one, but his jumping has tended to fall apart when he's been in a deeper Grade 1.
It has. And I think both have to step forward, whereas perhaps Fury Road might. Miller's Bank was good at entry, but I just think better ground might also suit Capodanno. It was here last year that he beat Capodanno Bridge in a 3-mile handicap hurdle that you first thought, oh, he could be a good chaser.
Okay. You mentioned Miller's Bank. Let's have a look at him. He brought a first Grade 1 success both for his trainer Alex Hales and rider Keeler Woods when winning the Manifesto at Aintree. This was a very, very good performance. It was a strongly run race and he travelled beautifully throughout it.
He did, and into the home straight as they head to the third last. He's in behind, but he's travelling the best of them all. Gets a bit close, pecks on landing, has to switch out to find his gap going to the second last. Gets sort of sideways in midair, but when he lands and Keelan Woods catches a hold of him, he just opens up and away he goes. Down to the last, jumps it really well and gallops all the way to the line. And you can see why Keelan Woods and Alex Hales have thought, yeah, we'll go to Punchestown. Similar sort of ground, right-handed as opposed to left, but another flat track. And, he's gotten his jumping together. He unseated a couple of times early in his career, but he's a pretty decent horse. And this is, whilst you have Bob Olinger in there, this is a race that could be won.
Now, you know Punchestown better than I do. We described it as undulating at the start of the show. You just mentioned that it's flat there, because I do think a flat track is really important to Aintree. How different are the two?
I suppose I call it flat because you climb as you pass the winning post in a part of the race that doesn't really affect the outcome of the race as such. It's after going 2 furlongs in a 2 mile or furlong in a 2 mile chase. It's not even halfway in the 3 mile races or two. It's just you climb up past the stands, up to the top of the hill, and then you run immediately back down. So there is one hill, but it's past the winning post on a part of the track that doesn't seem to affect the race. So there's 2 fences on the incline, but there's no fence on the decline. You're at the bottom of the hill before you meet the ditch. Now it's contours after that, but you wouldn't describe it as undulating. There is a hill, there is a climb and a descent, but not at a part of the race that's relevant.
Okay, you should have mentioned that earlier when we had our graphic up.
I just describe it as, that's why I think it suits front runners, because from the ditch at the bottom of the hill, which is 1.25 miles from home, it suits the horse that's freewheeling on the front end.
Okay, it'll be interesting to see whether Miller's Bank can transfer that kind of flat track form to Punchestown as you describe it. He's also got to prove himself over 3 miles. Then there is Fury Road. Isn't he the overpriced horse in the race? He missed the Brown advisory because of the ground, and then he ran an absolute stormer when second behind a Hoisinure in the Mildmay, didn't he?
He did run a stormer. Looked like he was going to win the Drinmore when he was slow at the last. Beat Run Wild Fred at Leopardstown at Christmas. Was disappointed at the Dublin Racing Festival behind Gallop in the Champ, and then went to Aintree, and he has run a blinder. High Senior, Brave Man's Game, Long Presse. I mean, it's proper form, and there was nothing disappointed about him. They're going to 3 out, they're all in with a shout, but away from the second last end, and when High Senior, even though he wasn't brilliant at it, opens up, he just gets away from Fury Road, and Fury Road follows him all the way down to the last fence and to the line. But if you're going strictly on form, to split a High Senior and Long Presse, you'd have to say, yeah, he's the overpriced one.
Who leads in this race?
Capodanno will be good and handy. Bob Olinger won't be far away. Lifetime Ambition and Ballyshannon Rose, they both like to be up there too. And Paul Fahey's mare, she was good in Thurles when she beat Jeremy's Flame, was no match for Gabby's Cross, and then unseated behind Velvet Elvis and Navan, but she likes to be up there as well, Ballyshannon Rose.
Okay. I do think that Bob Olinger at his best, even over fences, which isn't that much above his superb novice hurdling form, but he hasn't gone on over fences. We've discussed this much during the series. I still think this sets quite a serious standard here. But at the prices, I'm interested in Fury Road. How about you?
Yeah, I'd be interested. Yeah, definitely. I just think the Bob Olinger we saw in Cheltenham was going to be beaten so far. And even when he did go about winning, it was just so laboured. And I think he's probably opposable.
Okay, well, this is anathema to most of our viewers, I'm afraid, Ruby. 68.9% think that Bob Olinger will win. 12.4 go for Capodanno. I don't know what they're looking at. 9.9 for Fury Road. Miller's Bank gets 8.7. So overwhelmingly, our viewers think that Bob Olinger will win. Giant's Causeway has got in touch to say, if the real Bob Olinger turns up, He should win. The other 3 horses are good horses in their own right, but Bob should still be beating them. The step up in trip will help out his jumping too. Plus, he's by Sholokov, and his dam is a half-sitter to Look Like's Trouble, so I don't think the staying trip should be a problem either. Who is the real Bob Olinger? For me, he's the winner of the Ballymore, isn't he? That's the real Bob Olinger.
It
is.
The
hurdles.
Yeah, it is. It is the real Bob Olinger. I think the one to beat Capodanno in January would definitely do. I know he still finished 40 lengths in front of Bustleton at the Cheltenham Festival, but I'm not sure that Bob Olinger is going to do.
Okay. Innovation Marketing thinks Bob Olinger has questions to answer after a poor run at Cheltenham at odds on and unproven stamina. Capodanno offers value. The V word. And Kevin has quickly replied, not that bad. He won.
He got paid.
Right, let's move on to the Bective Stud Champion Novice Hurdle, shall we? And we can start. This is a great clash. Did you expect Sir Gerhard and Dysart Dynamo to be taking each other on?
No, but I did think it would be Dysart or Stateman. I thought maybe Stateman would stay at 2 miles, but he's obviously now going to go 2.5 miles. Willie was keen to bring Sir Gerhard back. I did think it will be one or other. I did happen to think it will be Stateman though.
Okay, well, it's Dysart Dynamo. Let's have a look at what he's got to beat in terms of Sir Gerhard, shall we? This is his win in the Ballymore Novices Hurdle when there had been watering on the track on the old course overnight. And then, of course, it rained as well. So filthy and deteriorating conditions during the course of the day. He was stepping up in trip. It didn't bother him.
Yeah, so what? It's National Hood Racing. Whoever's soft to get, what difference does it make? Sir Gerhard, look, we picked him up away from the 3rd hurdle, and I think this is why Willie was keen to come back and trip at him. You can see how he's starting to come alive for Paul Townend, and he really latches on the bridle. From being just behind halfway away from the 3rd hurdle, we picked him up to the 5th hurdle, the first in the back straight. He quickens at the hurdle, and he's pulled himself all the way into 3rd place. He's quick but tight at the 6th hurdle, and then down the hill, look, he's travelling by far the best. Now, I know he doesn't pull as far away from 3-stripe life as people might have liked or have thought he would have with the way he travelled and the way he jumped, but I think because he over-travelled, he wasn't able to, and I'd have no worries about him coming back and trip to 2 miles.
Okay, I agree with all of those points. The whole point he went over 2.5 was to help his jumping. Do you think that once is enough to have sorted it out? I'm not so sure. That's why he went over 2.5. I'd say you look at a race, you figure out which one you can win. And Willie had Dysart Dynamo in the 2 miles. Nicky had Constitution Hill and John Bond. And the 2.5 to me looked an easier contest. And that's where he ran. Okay, so if he's up against Dysart Dynamo, would he have to jump better than he did at the Dublin Racing Festival? He will, but I think from his 3 runs over hurdles, that's the poor day. I think the other 2 days were very good. And I expect him to be more like the other 2 rather than the 1. Okay. Let's move on to the Supreme then, where Dysart Dynamo ran, falling at the 3rd last, and Mighty Potter was pulled up after quite a bad mistake midway. Obviously, Constitution Hill blew them all away. Dysart Dynamo went off quite keenly and remained keen and was hassled quite a bit by John Bond as well. Yeah, watch it from the start. I mean, John Bond lines up on the inside. Dysart Dynamo is outside him as they go to the 1st hurdle. Constitution Hill sits in 3rd. Then you have Mighty Potter and Kilcrut. But away from the 1st hurdle, Paul is out wide, but he can't get across in front of Aidan Coleman to get into a position where he can dictate the race. So when they get to the 2nd hurdle, Aidan is still right down his inside, and John Bond jumps it much better than Dysart Dynamo. But then Dysart Dynamo joins back to John Bond, but he gets running with Paul and in the wrong place. Up the hill past the stands, he runs up around the corner and then meets the descent into the back straight. And when they face down to the 3rd hurdle, they're absolutely flying. Dysart Dynamo is a couple of lengths clear of John Bond, who's in front of Constitution Hill. Kilcrut is going as fast as he's able. So is Mighty Potter. At the 4th hurdle, Mighty Potter makes a mistake. And at the 5th one, he makes the mistake that finishes his contest. But it's at that 5th hurdle where Paul Townend is thinking, I can just about get a breather into Dysart Dynamo, that John Bond jumps straight back up on his inside again and keeps the pressure on him. Mighty Potter pulls up down to 3 out. Dysart Dynamo, I thought watching it live, had to be running on empty, and he steps into it and falls. Who knows how he would have got on, but I know I didn't think he was going to win. No, he wasn't going to win, was he? I mean, the race was set up for an absolutely outstanding performance from Constitution Hill, and the likelihood of Dysart Dynamo having run like that being able to win seems highly unlikely. So, what about the matchup between him and Sir Gerhard then? Is he going to go and make the running?
Well, I'd imagine Dysart will, back on the track where he made all to win in February, January.
That's what I meant, yeah.
Yeah, I'd imagine Dysart will jump and go again. And maybe being on home soil, not with the atmosphere of the Cheltenham Festival, having to be away from home for 2 nights, maybe he'll be an easier ride. Patrick rides him. But I don't know. I'm a Sir Gerhard fan, and I think Dysart Dynamo will suit him.
And Mighty Bottom had made mistakes before then. I just wonder whether this sort of pace is his thing for hurdling.
That pace didn't seem to suit him on the day. But look, his form was definitely a lot better earlier in the year. When he beat Three Stripe Life at Leopardstown, looked unlucky behind Statuaire at Ferryhouse. So if he bounces back, he could run a good race. But I'm a Sir Gerhard fan, Lydia.
You have been all season. I'm not going to take that away from you. I'm assuming you can give no chance to Gatsby Gray and Vina Adanza.
Hard to fancy. Weight of 135. Vina Ardanza ran well at Aintree behind John Bond, but I think Davy Russell rode Vina Ardanza to run that way and achieved his best possible finishing position.
Okay, fine. And the last race we're going to have a look at on the Tuesday is the Howden Insurance Brokers Mares Novice Hurdle. I know compared to the other grade ones, this is only a listed event, but nonetheless, we're looking at horses that we've been talking about for much of the season. So I thought it would be interesting to have a look at. First of all, the Fairyhouse encounter that involves Dino Blue, Grangy and Luna Display. That was the race won by Brandy Love.
Yeah, it was. And this race replaces the Ladies' Cup, which is moved to later in the card. Usually Punchestown opens with a bank race, which was always traditional, but tradition has been chucked out the window, which looks likely in lots of things these days. But yeah, the race at Fairyhouse, change of tactics. I mean, Grangy was ridden forward in Fairyhouse. Dino Blue was ridden further back. And it seemed to work for Dino Blue. Didn't seem to suit Grangy. And off the home turn, Grangy is starting to come to the end of her run, whereas Love Envoy, Brandy Love are closing down on her piste. Dino Blue does stay on and runs a lot better than she ran at Cheltenham. It was the change in distance for both, or change in tactics probably, that suited Dino Blue, and the change of tactics didn't seem to suit Grangy. She didn't get home. But is that run going to make both of those mares susceptible to Party Central, who's coming here from Cheltenham? Both of those have gone to Fairyhouse 10 days ago, whereas Party Central is coming straight from finishing 7th at Cheltenham.
Yeah, I agree that the tactics suited Dino B, even though she never quite got to the leaders. Back at Cheltenham in the Dawn Run, it was Grangy who was patiently ridden and never quite got to the leaders. Dino Blue was far too keen. Party Central was quite keen herself, though.
She was. I mean, look, if you're looking at it as they come at us from the start, Dino Blue's in the white cap in the middle in JP McManus's colours, down to the very inside in the red cap is Party Central, and Grangy in the white colours of the black cap is dropped in 3/4 of the way wide. But that's the way they went through the race. But when you get from the second last hurdle, as they start to approach the home turn, Dino Blue was over raced all the way, but Party Central was really catching your eye under Jack Kennedy towards the inside. Paul Townend is delaying his challenge as long as he can on Grangy. Ultimately, she's the one that comes home best. Behind Love Envoy, a horse with no name, Nurse Susan, Briganza, Impervious. They were all much of a muchness all the way up to the last hurdle. Party Central fades as they get to the last. Grangy's the one coming home. I thought watching the race that Paul Townend finished closer than he possibly should have. So I think Grangy could be the weakest one. He definitely rode her to pass as many horses as he possibly could. I thought the winner was the correct winner on the day, but I think Grangy was slightly flattered and Dino Blue gave herself no chance. But I think both having gone to Fairyhouse, they could be open to Party Central doing them both here. And Davy Russell is back on Party Central.
Yeah, and I thought Party Central did a bit too much at Cheltenham, as you already described. I'm not sure she liked particularly the final hill. She strikes me as a horse that has to be delivered late. And do you think that can be done at Punchestown?
Yes, it can, yeah. Definitely can. You do need to jump the last. If you miss the last hurdle at Punchestown, it can be hard to peg one back in front of you. But I think Davy will do that, and I'd be expecting him to be trying to deliver her as late as he can.
Okay, should we be looking at Instit at all, the 4-year-old filly from Willie Mullins?
I thought she was disappointing. on her first start. I thought she'd win at Limerick. She was second behind Man of Work. I was a little disappointed with her on that occasion, but I think she's a filly with a bright future.
Okay. Right. That's day one rather, at Punchestown. Let's move on to the Wednesday then, and we'll start with the Irish Mirror Novice Hurdle. And this involves a rematch between horses that ran at the Albert Bartlett and also those that ran at the Dublin Racing Festival. We'll start with the Albert Bartlett Ruby, which was won by the Nice Guy on just his second hurdle start and fourth career start.
Yeah, defies the old theories as to what's required to win an Albert Bartlett.
I've got a white flag on those. I absolutely accept it now. I was holding on to that stat too long.
Gone now. History, yeah.
It is.
Stats. Read them a different way and get a different result. But look, it was competitive renewal, as in pace-wise. Staghorn, Classic Getaway, Chantruse, Manila Cocooner. They went a good gallop early, and a couple of these were a little bit keen, especially Manila Cocooner and Classic Getaway. And he's picked them up down to the second hurdle on second last hurdle, on the first circuit. Manila Cocooner is wide on the track, and he's racing quite in Paul Townend's hands, whereas Bardenstown Lad is a nice position behind the pace halfway down the inside. The Nice Guy, your eventual winner, in Malcolm Denmark's colours, is just outside him. So is Ramalais. So, they were all in decent positions. Manila Cocooner is jumping, or he dumped the last hurdle on the first circuit. Bardenstown Lad lost his position for no apparent reason. From being in a nice position, he gets outpaced quite early in the race. Manila Cocooner freewheeled down the hill to the first and the second circuit. Brilliant jump. But then at the next hurdle, his brilliant jumping nearly had him on the floor. He stood way too far back from that one and landed in the middle of it. And then when you get down to the second last hurdle again, he's still going really well, Manila Cocooner. But the Nice Guy is starting to come out of the pack, and your eye is drawn to him. So is Ramalais. Bardenstown Lad is plugging on up to the last hurdle, though. When things start to get tough, as you get to up to near 3 miles, it's the Nice Guy who's always going to win. Jumps the last well under Sean O'Keefe and pulls away to beat Manila Cocooner. Ramalais missed the last, seems to fade, and Bardenstown Lad stayed on. But the more you look back at it, and you're thinking, if Manila Cocooner settles on an easier track like Punchestown, will he stretch the others to try and get to him, or do you just go with form? Allaho couldn't reverse it with Manila Indo.
I think it's a tough one.
Cocooner reverse it with the Nice Guy.
I think it's a tough one. This for the reasons that you say. This track, this race, could suit Manila Cocooner really well. When he's on song, he's got that bit of pace and he jumps really well. But the Nice Guy is so unexposed, so lightly raced, so sharply improving that I couldn't be dogmatic that even if Manila, the best Manila Cocooner turned up, that he still wouldn't beat that horse. I can't have the others. I can understand why John McConnell's put on the cheek pieces on Bardenstown Lad for the first time for the reasons that you've described. He lost his place in the middle of the race and he needs to stick it in there. I think you're implying that Ramalais didn't stay, and I felt the same. And obviously Good Time Johnny, he'd worked his way up through handicaps, could never really cut it at all here. So I, like you, I'm with it between the first and second. Which side were you coming down on? I'm
going to stick with history. I did think leaving Cheltenham, if I rode Allaho different, he'd beat Manila Indo the next time. They turned up in these very races. I rode Allaho differently, but the result was still the same. So I'm going to go with what history's already taught me, and I think the Nice Guy will still come out on top.
Okay, let's go back to the Dublin Racing Festival when Manila Cocooner did come out on top, and Manila Crooner was finished second. Now, he missed the Cheltenham Festival, and further behind we have Bron, who also missed the Cheltenham Festival and has since been busy since.
Yeah, Bron won was second at Navan, and then won behind Daily Present, and then won at Ferryhouse. But Manila Crooner made a bad mistake here, the second last in Leopardstown under Jack Kennedy, and loses his position. He gets tight onto the bend. He has to switch to try and come after Manila Cocooner to the last, who jumped brilliantly for Danny Mullins. Hollow Games is just beside him. The closer they get to the line, the closer Manila Crooner is getting to Manila Cocooner, which would suggest that an extra couple of furlongs would suit him. He's definitely a fresher horse, but you're on drier ground now at a faster track, and he'll need to be fresher and probably a little bit faster.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that too. But for me, the really interesting horse in this race is Journey With Me. He was running a huge race in the Ballymore when coming down at the last.
He was. I'd gone along initially just behind the pace, but like when Sir Gerhard pulled his way forward, Journey With Me had gone forward too, led from a long way in that race, kept increasing the tempo. And down the hill, there's only Sir Gerhard, Three Stripe Life and Journey With Me left in it. Sir Gerhard has the gears to go by him off the home turn, heading for the last. 3-Stripe Life is coming to pass him as well. But look, he fell at the last. Still a really good run. He does look like a horse that will improve going out in distance, and he's without doubt of interest in this race.
Yeah, he's shaped to me like a stayer and potentially even a chaser, but why not have a go at this? I think the race will suit him really well. This is a good race, don't you think?
I think it is, yeah. I think there's plenty of depth to it, and I think he's not, even as a Grade 1 novice, I think there'll be a lot of horses to come out of it for next season.
Agree. Right, let's move on to the Ladbrokes Punchestown Gold Cup, shall we? This is a corker of a race, possibly the best of the entire meeting. What do you think?
Look, there's real strength and depth. I think when you get as late in the season as Punchestown is, or for some people to still have the King George winner, the Savills winner, the Melling Chase winner, the Betfair Bowl winner, all turning up along with the Ryanair winner, I think it's a cracking race. What's missing? The Irish Gold Cup winner, and obviously the Cheltenham Gold Cup winner. But a Plutar, having shown how good he is left-handed and how not inferior, but he does have a weakness going right-handed. He was probably never likely to come here, but I think the rest are here, bar conflated, unfortunately.
It's interesting, Allaho, because obviously he tried 2 miles at this meeting last year. Now he's trying 3 miles, and I like this. So we're going to find out yet more about Allaho. Let's have a look at the Ryanair Chase success. This was a huge performance to beat Janadil. It's a massive performance yet again on the clock. Again, I think for the second year running, he has produced the time performance, the visual performance of the entire festival.
Yeah, but this is a bit like Cui Vega. When she came back after winning her first Mayor's Hurdle, she ran the Champion Hurdle, she got beaten, and then she came back the following year and Willie went up in trip with her and she won 4 Stayers Hurdles. So look, he's doing the same with Allaho. The Ryanair, yeah, what you'd like about it and what's giving you confidence that he'll get the trip is how settled he now is. I know he's going to go gallop. Eldorado Allen is right behind him, but he's not keen like he used to be. Jump the first well, jump the second well, and by the time they get down the hill, he's just leaving decent horses behind him, and he shows no sign of slowing. Really good jump at the second last, and even at the last fence when Paul Townend spots a long stride, Allaho changes his mind, doesn't get overly high and hits the fence. He still doesn't lose any ground to Janadil. He regains his momentum. Without sprinting, he manages to get back up to the tempo he was at and maintains the distance he had over Janadil back in third. So, look, will he stay? You don't know until he goes and does it. He's had 5 attempts at 3 miles. He did beat Manila Indo and Clonmel in a novice hurdle. He hasn't won on the other 4 attempts, so there has to be a question mark. But just with his professionalism now, with his age and with his style of racing, it looks more likely than it did in the past.
Yeah, I can buy that. Although he was 4th in the Savills Chase 2020, so far when he's tried 3 miles, his form hasn't been comparable to his form at shorter distances. But I get the idea that he's sort of calmed down a bit. Are we splitting hairs if we say he's better left-handed than right-handed?
His best performances have been at Cheltenham. He's 2 standout performances. But having said that, he has won at Punchestown and Thurles a couple of times, Clonmel. But his standout performances were definitely at Cheltenham.
Let's move on to Clan des Obeaux, who won this race last year, and he was revived last season by first-time Cheek Pieces Aintree, and that carried through to Punchestown. This time at Aintree, he will first-time blinkers, and from a very early stage, you can see that he was interested.
Yeah, he was back on form. Obviously, you had the blinkers worked, and he was definitely... Yeah, he was more like the horse we'd seen at this meeting last year and again at Punchestown after that. And even got up to Kenboy early in the race and Eldorado Allen, went to the third last. And what I liked about him was he hit the third last hard. Now, it's not the first mistake he's ever made, but it didn't put him off. He was back going by the time he got to the second last, jumped it well, and he just starts to pull away from Clonfladen from their home. And I think he wasn't doing a stroke from the last home. Jumps the last well, and it's never in doubt, but he doesn't do any more than he has to anymore.
Okay, let's go back to Punchestown last year when he came up against a number of those that reopposed. Album Photo, Faku Didari's, Kenboy, all up against him. And he was still on song here. This was a very good performance from him.
It was, and he took this race really by the scruff of the neck. Mellon, Kenboy and himself booked out over the first fence. Mellon got in control of the race after jumping 3 fences, but by the time they got to the 6th fence, Sam Twiston Davis had jumped Clanda's Oboe to the front, and he never really let the rest of them back into the race. Now, he did made a mistake at the 12th. We saw him making one entry, never slowed him down. Across to the third last, he's stretching Fakir Dudari's stamina. Alboon Photo comes to join him. Alboon screws in the air. Clanda's Oboe gets a length. Down to the second last, they're going as quick as 3 mile chasers go. Clanda's Oboe was brilliant. Alboon Photo changes his mind and loses another length. And then to the last fence, Clanda's Oboe, he's flicking his ears. He's still waiting in front. There was a bit left in the locker. But I think what Clanda's Oboe is going to do, ridden that way, because you imagine Paul will be keen to make sure that the non-stayers or perceived non-stayers like Fakir and Allaho have a test. Allaho will add pace, or Clanda's Oboe will add pace to this race that might suit some of the others.
Yeah, okay. And how about Kenboy, who's wearing first-time cheek pieces? Will that revive him to the kind of form that he showed when, you might remember this, winning back in 2019, this race?
Just about. He needs something. They've worked for Clanda's Oboe. Cheek pieces did initially, and then blinkers. Maybe cheek pieces might work for Kenboy. Probably would have gone for blinkers myself, but cheek pieces is a start.
Okay, we saw Fakir Dudari's running third in this race last year, seeming not to stay. This season, he's been running well, and he's taken a second marshmallow chase at Aintree, at least as good as ever, but over the shorter trip.
Yeah, and he's a fair horse, but definitely 2.5 suits him. I thought he travelled really well in Aintree. Third last fence, jumped it really well. To the second last, he's going as well as anything. Hitman and So Royale look like they're dangerous going to the second last, but when Fakir jumps it, he pulls readily clear. And without getting a smack behind the saddle from Mark Walsh, he gallops strongly to the line. So when you're looking at it, you think, God, he has to stay. A bit like looking at Allaho, you think they have to stay. But Fakir has had 2 runs over 3 miles, third in this race last year. He's not from 2 at this distance.
Fresher this year, he missed Cheltenham, he hadn't last year.
Yeah, that could be a huge thing. That could be a big point to it. But you're looking at him getting to the line in entry, you're thinking there's no reason he couldn't go further.
Okay, let's have a look at the Cheltenham Gold Cup as our final bit of evidence. This was a slowly run race with Manila Indo finishing second, Galvin fourth, Alboon Photo sixth, and Tornado Flyer pulling up.
Yeah, and I suppose the race takes shape. You watch them through the tape, everything comes forward in a line. Galvin, Manila Indo, Tornado Flyer are all towards the inside-ish handy. Alboon Photo's a bit wider than that. But after they jump 2 fences and get to the bend away from the stands and the race takes shape, you've Asterion Forlange in front of Santini. Manila Indo is dropped into the pocket with Alboon Photo. Galvin is directly behind Manila Indo and Tornado Flyer is behind him. But as they move then down into the back straight, the third fence, Right moves up to join Santini and Asterion. They pretty much stay at the front end of the Gold Cup until they get to the 9th, where Royal Pagaille pulls his way up on the outside under Charlie Deutsch. And at halfway then, you've Asterion, Right, Royal Pagaille and Santini are the first 4 horses dictating the gallop in the Gold Cup. You wouldn't have said they were the fastest 4 horses in the race, but they're the 4 that are dictating the pace. They turn to the 17th, which is the last ditch. The same 4 horses are still on the front and hanging in there. Alboon Photo makes a mistake, and then they get to the between 4 out. You could throw a blanket over the whole field. Royal Pagaille makes a mistake, but they're all in a heap. Down to the third last, Manila Indo flies that, and Robbie Power sends him about his business. Galvin is trapped down the inside behind, and as the race quickens, it really played to a Plutar's strengths, and he gets a gap between them, heading for the second last, and he has the gears to jump that and go and win by an incredible distance. And then the others keep plugging away. But the interesting one from the last home is not Galvin and Alboon Photo staying on, or the Protectorate manages to keep going after the mistake. It's just how slow Manila Indo gets in the last 100 yards. He folds.
So is that why he's wearing a first-time tongue tie this time, do you think?
It possibly is, but for a horse that had won a Gold Cup that stays, why did he stop 100 yards down in this year's Gold Cup? He completely ties up, and I thought that was a little bit worrying.
Okay, so you've painted the scenario here. You don't think it's going to be allowed to be a slowly run race because of the threat that Allaho would pose, in particular in those circumstances. Who do you see coming out on top?
I'm starting to think, I think Allaho will stay, and I think he's going to be the hardest horse to beat. But if the others go at him and turn it into a slog, I think there's a small chance it could suit Galvin.
Interesting. Because a steadily run Gold Cup was not up his street at all.
No. And I know you could say, well, he won a steadily run Savills, but that race got going a good bit further from home, and Galvin was in a much better position to not get trapped behind horses. So I think a really strongly run race, if Galvin was on form, could be the one.
Okay, I'm going to stick with the blinker still working on Clan des Obeaux, because I think when he's on song, he is absolutely brilliant and does set a very high standard in those circumstances. Now, one of the most eagerly awaited clashes at Cheltenham was that between Facile Vega and American Mike. There is a rematch at Punchestown, and we asked you whether it would be the same result. You replied, swings and roundabouts, said, better ground, Elliot's horse in better form, it'll be a lot closer. And Tony Amato says, of course, the same results. Facile Vega is by far the best bumper horse I've ever seen. A bold statement there from Tony. What do you think, Ruby?
I think different day, different track, different set of circumstances. Jamie Codd obviously will do something a little bit different, but I think Facile Vega being by walk in the park, I think the drier surface could even bring out a better horse.
What do you think the little bit difference that Jamie Codd will do will be?
I don't know. Does he try and really stretch? Facile Vega looks a quickish horse. Does he really try and stretch him, or will he completely change tactics and make Patrick Mullins commit and come at him? It'll be interesting to see what Jamie Codd does. But look, in Cheltenham, we got the dust up we wanted off the home turn. The two of them turned in, and it was take your pick, which one are you on? And Facile Vega had the gears to go and beat American Mike. I'd say they're two really good horses. Sea Bank Bistro will run again. He finished fourth. Redemption Day never fired on the day. He'll line up as well, but I am a Facile Vega fan, and I think on drier ground you could even see a better horse.
On to Thursday, and so we start with the Ladbrokes Champion Stayers Hurdle. There is how they bet, and we're going to start by looking back at Cheltenham for the Stayers Hurdle there. We don't have the winner, Flooring Porter, or the second time hill, but we have the third Paisley Park and the fifth Classical Dream. Yeah,
change of tactics from Classical Dream here from his win at Leopardstown. He's dropped in right at the back. Paisley Park is just in front of him. When they get after going a circuit, they're both towards the back still. Paisley Park and Classical Dream, they're 3/4 of the way back, the two of them. And then when they get back to the top of the hill in the Stayers Hurdle, Danny Mullins slows it down in front, which really doesn't suit Paisley Park at all. And they start to build it from there. And Paisley Park was flat to the boards down the hill. Classical Dream looks like he's travelling into it nicely, going to 2 out. And off the home turn, he's moving up with his chance to come and have a go at Flooring Porter. He moves second on the approach to the last, but Classical Dream flattens out from their home and fades, whereas Paisley Park, who wasn't really in your shot for a lot of the race at the business end, he stays on powerfully and just fails to get second. This race will depend on what way it's run. A strongly run race definitely suits Paisley Park, and I don't know what way they're going to ride Classical Dream.
Yes, but he's proven at Punchestown he was impressive here last year, whereas for Paisley Park it's a complete unknown.
It is a complete unknown, and there's two ways of looking at it. Will an away trip spark Paisley Park? It could well do. You just don't know what you're going to get with him. But watching his run in Cheltenham, there's still plenty of life in the tank. It's just taking longer to get going every time. But look, Classical Dream, we get the real Classical Dream. He's a big chance, but the one around in Cheltenham won't be good enough. And that said, Sire de Burley then at Aintree, he was really good.
He was tremendous. I was starting to think that he might be on the downgrade. Not a bit of it. At the age of 10, he floored the Porter.
He did. And at Aintree, it was most noticeable when they rounded the bend away from the stands that Flooring Porter got racing away from the crowd there. And he spread eagle this race down the back straight in Aintree, Flooring Porter, much different to Cheltenham. Whereas Sire de Burley was the one that was able to kind of keep tabs on him and keep going after him. And at the bottom of the back straight, when Danny Mullins went to slow it to try and give Flooring Porter a chance, Mark Walsh got straight onto his tail on Sire de Burley, didn't allow him to slow down. And you were kind of thinking from turning in, it was ominous. Sire de Burley had got to Flooring Porter. There'd be no ease off in the pressure. He joined Flooring Porter at the second last. They both got to the last together, but Sire de Burley ultimately outstayed Flooring Porter, who'd raced a bit harder earlier in the race. Good performance from Sire de Burley, but what they need, Sire de Burley and Paisley Park, is a really strong gallop. And I'm not sure either are going to get that in this contest.
That's one facet. The other is it's the form that we've talked about, an attainable standard for one of the bigger prices, more left field horses that you can see in this race.
That's possible, but I don't see which one. I know the Devils coachman would ideally like rain, which I don't think there's any much forecast. Ashdale Bob ran really well at Goran in the Galmoy behind Royal Kahala. That's an okay run. Mellon seems to be back in form when he's down in grade. And Vanillier, well, he was disappointed in his last couple of starts over fences and was disappointed here last year over hurdles when galloping the champ, but his Albert Barter run will give him a shout. I don't know, Lydia, which one of the outsiders I'd be willing to take a chance on.
Right, let's move on to the Barberstown Castle Novice Chase, shall we? This should be interesting. How do you see this playing out? Should we start with Gentleman Demi's victory at Aintree, beating Edwardstone, no less?
Yeah, and I think what was key to this, though, watching them going to the first fence, Gentleman Demi's in front down the inside, is For Pleasure in the pink, who dropped in. For Pleasure is a front runner as well, but he dropped in. That allowed Gentleman Demi to get on the front end by the last fence on the first circle, which was the fourth. He's nice and relaxed in a good rhythm. Back to the fourth last, the cross fence, gets in quite close. Your eye is automatically drawn to third time Lucky's mistake, but Gentleman Demi does miss it in front as well. But by the time he gets to the bend, he's hard back on the bridle. Second last fence, Edwardstone's coming to challenge, lands awkwardly, but straight away quickens and puts this race to bed. Now, you can say Edwardstone, end of a season, coming from the Arkle, maybe hasn't run to form. Or do you look at it? Gentleman Demi beats him, Edwardstone is second, third time Lucky is third. That's quite reminiscent of Edwardstone's Warwick form. So there's two ways of looking at that. Was Edwardstone over the top, or did he run the same as he had run in Warwick? And is Gentleman Demi very good? I don't know.
How much did Gentleman Demi control that race, do you think?
Totally.
And will he be able to?
Totally.
Will he be able to this time?
I don't think so. I think when you look back at the Arkle, you have Magic Days. So through the tape they go, Magic Days down the inside and front. Keep your eye on Blue Lord in the Simon Monier, Isaac Suez colours. He spends way too long in the air at the first fence, goes to the second fence then. Magic Days is bowling, but Blue Lord again is a bit slow. We lose St. Sam at the fourth when Brave Shaska falls, brings down St. Sam. So we're not quite sure is he a 2 miler or not. They get to 4 out, Blue Lord stands way back but lands on his hind end awkwardly. He just didn't jump like a 2 miler in the Arkle to me, Blue Lord. He needs to brush up on that. Off the home turn to the second last, Magic Days and Cour Sublime are gone. Houghton Couleur is flat out, and Gabinaco's the interesting one, Lydia. He snuck into the race nicely for Keith Donoghue. He's the one going after Edwardstone. Get to the last, Edwardstone flies it and he's gone for home, but Gabinaco's the one that keeps chasing him, and he gets the better of Blue Lord to run on and finish second. I think he's probably the percentage call here. I think with Magic Days and maybe Gentleman Demi on the front end, it'll suit Gabinaco, who can probably sit a little closer than he did in the Arkle, but I love the way he finished at Cheltenham.
I'm not sure about this race. It confuses me. I'm kind of leaning towards St. Sam because we don't know what was going to happen at Cheltenham. And I thought he ran really, really well, and different tactics might serve him well here compared with the Dublin Racing Festival really good run.
Yes, definitely. He was being ridden different in the Cheltenham market compared to the Irish one. And look, that just happens. That's jump racing. You get brought down. But yeah, he seems to be in great form at home as well.
Okay, that's Thursday. Let's move on to Friday. The Chacun Hurdle, Ruby, sponsored by Paddy Power. Is there anything to beat Honeysuckle? Of course not.
No, it's all about Honeysuckle. And simple as that. And we're not going any further than yet. We're just going to look at Honeysuckle. Champion Hurdle, Honeysuckle does what Honeysuckle always does. Lines up towards the outside in the second row. Appreciated and Zana here go forward. Second hurdle, she's still wide, fiddles it. Down the hill to the third hurdle, she lets fly, but watch her on landing. Rachel Blackmore has to slow her down. That's the kind of form she was in. Gets in tight to the fourth, but again on landing, Rachel's taking her back. Switches inside, Zana here going to the fifth hurdle, and lands right behind them, travelling really well. Down the hill, she's in the pack, doesn't really see the third last hurdle, yet she flies it, splits them, going to 2 out, pops that, slap down the shoulder on landing, race is over. Quickens off the bend. Honeysuckle is heading to win a second Champion Hurdle. Rachel keeps the revs up on her all the way to the last hurdle, jumps it well, never in doubt.
Let's move on to the Alana Holmes Champion Novice Hurdle and start with a horse that's improving all the time. This is Flame Bearer, really likeable.
He is really likeable and did really well to win on his last start at Fairyhouse. Got into all sorts of trouble between the last 2 hurdles. Hador was in front. It's high turns in the yellow colours on the outside. Jack Doyle even went for a run on Paul Townend's inside, which he doesn't get. And to be fair to Flame Bearer, it gets tight at the last hurdle. But when the gap does open and it's halfway up the run in Fairyhouse, when he gets to switch him out, Flamebearer shoots through and beats Hador. That was over 2 miles. I think going up and trip will suit him. And he has built from a maiden hurdle to a grade 3 to a grade 2, and now he's having to go to grade 1. It's the natural progression.
Then we've got Stateman, the winner of the County Hurdle, going into graded company.
Yeah, lined up in the County Hurdle off a really favourable mark. Paul Townend rode him wide 2/3 of the way back. Was a bit keen sort of after the first hurdle. You can see where he latches on, but he pulled his way into position. Third last hurdle, jumped it really well. Not a bad position. Down the hill to the second last, Paul, even though he was wide, still has the edge out to get a run. And he basically circles the field off the home turn to find himself in front long way before the last hurdle. Jumps it efficiently and keeps going nicely to win. He was a good performance. Still, though, he'll have to step up on it a little bit to win a grade 1.
And stable companion Kilcrut, who was last seen when third in the Supreme.
Yeah, never got going in the Supreme. He was back beside Mighty Potter. Couldn't go to Gallop, Dysart, Dynamo, John Bond and Constitution Hill were going. He was flat out going to the third hurdle. But to be fair to Kilcrut, he didn't stop. He's at the back of your shot away from the second last, and he keeps going to finish third. Stepping up and trip would definitely suit him, or look like it's definitely going to suit him.
And the winner is here. You were very keen on Stateman in the County Hurdle.
Yeah, I'm not going to desert them. I just thought, watching the replays to do this show, I thought he was a little bit more impressive than he was. I thought initially watching it, he had more up his sleeve. I'm hoping just racing a bit keen took a bit out of his finishing burst.
And finally, the Saturday, we're going to start with the 4-year-olds first off, the champion 4-year-old hurdle grade 1. Is it all about the triumph?
I think it is. I think we saw that in the entry, Lydia. Brazil was the winner, went to entry, was no match for Pied Piper and Milton Harris's horse, whose name I can't think of right now. Night Salute. So look, maybe that's the form of the Fred Winter. Having said that, Gaelic Warrior, he does look like a horse that'll be pretty useful next season. So I think it is all about the triumph. Triumph looked a good race on the day. They went a solid gallop without going mad. And Fieldor was always handy on the outside, but I think Fieldor probably could have done with somebody dragging him faster from halfway, from the top of the hill. He needed the race to pick up and be dragged into a test of stamina, whereas it didn't. It was a consistent race, and it allowed Vauban, who was quite quick, cover him easily halfway up to the last hurdle. Now, Vauban did make a mistake at the last, and you'd have to love the way he quickened again to pull away and win. He looks a serious horse. You'd imagine back to an easier track will really suit Vauban, whereas Fieldor will need something to make this a searching contest if he's going to turn the form around.
And what is it going to be? Pace, track, scenario?
You would always think, coming back from the Triumph, that maybe the one that didn't get home in the Triumph might win at Punchestown, let alone one that was as fast as Vauban. And I think he'll be very hard to oppose.
Okay. Let's move on to the Coolmore Kew Gardens Irish EBF Mares Champion Hurdle. If Epitante runs here, following her Aintree success, is this hers for the taking?
Definitely. I was impressed with her at Aintree. She was a bit keen early in the race. Aidan Coleman managed to get her to switch off relatively well, but from the time they turned in 3 hurdles to jump, it's when is Aidan Coleman going to deliver her? Jumps the third last well. McFabulous and Zana here trying to stretch, pops the second last, gets beside Zana here going to the last. I know he falls, but she was going to win anyway. I think to step up and trip suited her, and definitely not having to take on Honeysuckle was a massive help.
It looks like an ideal target, doesn't it? Let's try and unpick, though, the Mares Hurdle at Cheltenham. It was won by her stable companion, also trained by Nicky Henderson, Mary's Rock. But there's a lot of horses to pick out in behind, notably Tell Me Something Girl, who was brought down 2 out.
Yeah, strange renewal. Good ground. Maybe definitely good ground. Don't think they went mad. They went quick up over the first hurdle, but when Heaven Help Us gets beside Western Victory after the third, this race seemed to steady up. And when you get to the third last hurdle, there's 12 runners. You could throw a blanket over the 12 of them as they face down to the third last hurdle. They're all in a bunch. Heaven Help Us, or Tell Me Something Girl, edges out in the right of your shot, going to 2 out. Indefatigable falls, brings down Tell Me Something Girl, and then Mrs. Milner, Brian Cooper, drops his whip in that melee. So she does well to stay on. But look, I think it was steadily run and got into a dash. Queensbrook quickened off the bend. Marie's Rock came after her. Mrs. Milner was staying on. I even thought going to the last, Stormy Ireland was getting a renewed run on the inside, and Echoes and Rain, who had been last, she kept plugging away. Hard race to figure out. because of the pace of it. I think this will be a little bit different at Punchestown. Something will surely go on and make it a test of stamina. But I think that's all only going to suit Epatante.
Yeah, Epatante is the one that makes this a very, very different race. Otherwise, I'd be quite keen on Tell Me Something Girl, who I thought hadn't been at all asked for effort and was very unfortunate at Cheltenham. Right, that is the end of the Saturday. It's also the end of Road to Cheltenham series this time around, ending, of course, at Punchestown, having taken in Aintree. Thank you for your company along the way, Ruby. I hope you've enjoyed it.
I did. Thank you, Lydia. It definitely helps me keep some way on top of what's going on.
Yeah, me too. I hope we've helped you at home as well. I hope you've enjoyed it. We'll see you in November. Bye for now.